Okay, welcome everyone. Give everyone a couple minutes to jump in here before we get started. We're very excited for today's presentation. We've got some fun stuff planned. Let's see here. Feel free to drop us a line in the chat. Love to hear where you're from, um, what you're writing, whether you've worked with Scrivener or ProWritingAid before. All those are wonderful things that we like to hear about. So let us know. Make sure when you're uh, dropping a line, if you can switch your chat to make sure everyone can see that, would be great. There's a little drop down menu in there so we can all see that. Larry, welcome. Joel, Cole, great. Bear with us. We're expecting a pretty big turnout today, so the chat might get a little wild here as we try to, so everyone starts to come in here. Oh, I see someone from Boise, Idaho. I'm from Idaho, so I'm always happy to see a fellow Idahoan here. It's great. Wow, great. I'm seeing India. I'm seeing Florida. Excellent. Mexico. People all over the place. You know, Haley, that's one thing I love about doing these events is we get to meet so many different writers from all over the world.
I know, it's
It's
so much
just,
fun. Yeah.
yeah, it's exciting. Because I mean, it's just amazing that I mean, there's a lot of things in the world that divide us, but I think if we can find the common ground, the things that we all are passionate about, that kind of can bring us together, and see that we can do a lot together. We do a lot of good together. That's great. Okay, we have Houston. He uses both Scrivener and ProWritingAid. That's great. That was Barry Archer. Great, excellent. Estella says from North Dakota, have used ProWritingAid and am learning Scrivener. Great, excellent. We have Osa, Swedish fantasy writer. Good to see you again. Lee, good to see you back. I'm seeing some familiar names here and some new ones as well. This is great. Okay, perfect. Oh, I'm sorry. It looks like someone's having trouble loading their Scrivener project in ProWritingAid. I'm sure. Yeah, just send us an email. We'll see what we can do to help you out there. Let's see here. Love ProWritingAid, says Susan. That's excellent. Glad to hear that. And I'm really excited to have Haley with us today from the ProWritingAid team. I've been using ProWritingAid for a couple of years now as well, and I love it. It's great. It's a great app. And it works. And that's one thing I love about it too, is it works really, really well with Scrivener. So those of you who are Scrivener users, you're going to love ProWritingAid, and you're going to love Haley's presentation today. She's got some great stuff lined up for you. Oh yes, love ProWritingAid everywhere. Yeah, that when you guys Haley, when you guys released that, that was to me big game changer. The fact that we didn't have to open up the ProWriting app anymore, you could just have it directly there in Scrivener. Oh, it's
Everything
amazing.
wherever you write. Yes, it's great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was my dream. And then it's like literally I was thinking that as the whole AI revolution, everything was coming, I'm like, it'd be really great if ProWritingAid could just be in Scrivener. And then like literally not long, not months later, it's like, oh, it's here. Great. I love that. I love it. Oh yeah. Oh, perfect. Well, I'm seeing a lot of love for providing aid and Scrivener here. That's great. Well, before we get started here, I wanted to ask everyone a quick question to kind of get a feel for where you're at in your editing here. And let me see if I can find that question now that I wanted to ask, what is the best and toughest part of editing a book? And I know it's going to be different for everyone. So let us know, what is the best and most toughest part for editing your book? What have you struggled with? So Mary says pacing. Okay, figuring out pacing. Good. Robert says best part is when it's done. Okay, pacing for sure. Staying motivated. Okay, so keeping with it. You've written this book. I can feel you there. You've written an entire draft, maybe several drafts, and you're just like, when is this ever going to end? Am I ever going to get this right? Cutting the fat, knowing what you did is correct. Deep point of view, cutting out parts, tenses, cutting stuff. I'm seeing a lot of cutting stuff. Staying organized, keeping
Hard
it all
to know.
together.
Yeah, killing your darlings. It's just so difficult.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. Killing your darlings is difficult. I still struggle with that today. Yeah. I either overcut or undercut. It's how do you find that sweet spot, right? Rereading my repeated mistakes. Yep, yep. I can feel you there. Descriptions are probably the hardest for me. Yeah, that is a tough one. For me, it's deciding, you know, like what to describe. What are the most important things that the reader really needs to know, and cutting out the stuff they don't need, and then keeping the stuff they do. Misspell words, or not using the right word. Okay, yeah. Great. These are great. Distractions. I see distractions. I get distracted a lot too. Val, I feel you there. You seeing anything interesting here, Haley, that's really sticking out to you?
Again, I think cutting is difficult. I think it's actually interesting because I start this presentation answering almost exactly this question, and Amadeus
Great.
has gotten kind of exactly. It's just the knowing. I think that's the most difficult part of editing. It's the knowing. Whereas writing,
Hmm.
it's really easy. You start somewhere and it's like you begin at zero and you
Hmm.
end at the end.
Yeah.
Editing, you could edit forever, which is
You could.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
like it's very interesting. And so I think it's really I think a lot of these are kind of getting at that same thing of like you could kind of tinker forever. How do you
Hmm.
know when to stop tinkering?
Yeah, I think at some point, I'm a self-proclaimed perfectionist. So, and actually, that's what I used to love about the writing process. I would write something, and then I'd spend like I'd go into this forever editing mode and just edit and edit, seeking that perfect draft. And it really is kind of a waste of time. You really have to strive for what I call excellence. Like we just try to make it the best it possibly can be, and then move on. But yeah, deciding when it's excellent, that's a difficult decision to make. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing that. I'm going to go ahead and get our presentation started. We're about 8 minutes after the hour here. So let me just share my screen. We're going to go over just a quick schedule, quick introduction, and I'll turn the time over to Haley to jump right into this here. So let me get this pulled up. So first off, welcome everyone to our March webinar series brought to you by the creative minds behind Scrivener and Scapple, Literature and Latte. I'm Oliver Evanson, your host today, bringing you insight drawn from over 15 years of writing and Scrivener expertise. Now, whether you're a seasoned author or just starting out your writing adventure, our webinar is designed with your needs in mind. And today we'll be exploring perfecting your prose with ProWritingAid with our very special guest, Haley Milliman. Now, I will be moderating the session today, so if you encounter any technical difficulties, please reach out to me in the chat or in the Q&A. Ideally, the Q&A, because I'll be able to see those and get to those a lot quicker. If you have any questions, too, be sure to put those in the Q&A, and we'll get those answered towards the end here. Okay. So first off, let's talk about schedule. We're going to keep it really simple and straight to the point. We have a quick introduction to our speaker, who she is, what party writing is, all that fun stuff. After that, I'll turn that time directly over to her. I do have some free resources and some links to share with you guys at the end. And then once that's all finished up, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up with a quick Q&A. And hopefully we'll have lots of great questions to answer. I'm sure we will. Looks like we got a great turnout today. Now, I'm really excited to welcome Haley today. She's an excellent, sorry, an outstanding expert who brings a wealth of knowledge and passion for helping writers succeed. Our guest, Haley, is the director of community at ProWritingAid. She is dedicated to creating engaging and helpful learning content for millions of ProWriting users who rely on the platform to make their writing clear, polished, and impactful. And she's not only a leader in her field, but also an accomplished writer with an impressive portfolio, having written for dozens of publications on diverse topics such as education, marketing strategy, history, and entrepreneurship. So Haley's expertise and insights are sure to provide valuable tools and inspiration for your own writing journey. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Haley Milliman. Thank you so much for coming. I'll turn the
Thank you so
time over
much,
to you.
Oliver, and thank you so
Mhm.
much, everyone. It is so great to see you. I am going to share my screen and we'll just jump right in. Okay. All right. So today we're going to be talking all about perfecting your prose. As Oliver said, my name is Haley. I am the director of community at ProWritingAid. It's actually my 7-year anniversary of working at ProWritingAid today. Nowhere else I would rather spend it than on this webinar with all of you. And I just really have the best job ever because I get to think about writing and talk about writing and go around and work with writers all the time. And I just feel so very fortunate to do that all day, every day. So I want to start with a story, which sounds like it's going to be very familiar to many of you. I finished my first original novel when I was 22. I had written a lot before that. I was a very prolific fan fiction writer as a teen, but I finished my first actual full-length original novel when I was 22. And it was something that I had been thinking about for a very long time. And although the drafting process was exhausting and a bit confusing and demoralizing at times, it still was extremely exciting. And like I was just saying to Oliver, I felt this enormous sense of progress with it because I started with nothing and I kind of knew where I was going. And so while the drafting process was long and hard and arduous and everything I thought it would be, at the same time, I kind of came out of that process knowing I have a finished novel. But then after that, I had no idea what to do. I started going through my novel and doing some like lighthearted, loose edits. I would go into scenes here and there and tweak grammar and tweak spelling. I would proofread things. I would maybe try to add more description or clean up sentences that felt overly wordy, but I just didn't have a strong editing plan. And I just edited that novel for years and years and years until I finally kind of shelved it with no clear plan because I didn't really understand when I should start, when I should stop, what I should be doing during the editing process. And it sounds from the chat previously like that is very similar for a lot of us, that a lot of us aren't sure when to start, aren't sure when to stop, aren't sure where to bring people in. And this is a really, really common problem that I see over and over again as I'm talking with editing with people around the world. Writing and drafting is easy in that you know where to start and you know where to stop, but editing can go on forever. Hopefully what I'll cover today gives you a high-level overview of what you should be thinking about when you're editing, and then how you can also use technology to assist with that process so you can make easier decisions and kind of have stopping places and places to move forward. So what we're going to cover in this presentation today, first, I'm going to talk about the editing process itself and what I believe makes for a strong editing process. Then I'm going to go into why I believe technology is so helpful for self-editing, as well as really talk about the scale of how you can use technology, because technology is ever-changing, and you, as the writer, as the editor, have a lot of control over how and where you use technology, so I'll talk a bit about that. Then I'm going to talk about how to use technology specifically to support story or developmental editing, and then specifically to support line editing. And during that section, I'll show you specifically how to use different ProWritingAid features for both of those phases. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions as well. I do just want to front load. I know a lot of you are ProWritingAid users, and it sounds sometimes when I run these sessions, somebody might come with a specific technical error or something like that. Often it's really difficult for me to troubleshoot a technical error on a call like this. So if you have questions, please feel free to email hello@prowritingaid.com and just mention my name, and we would be happy to sort you out as quickly as possible. I will try my best to get through all questions, but if there's anything super technically, it might just be, it's sometimes hard to troubleshoot in a webinar setting like this. Okay, so let's first talk about what happens during the editing process. So I have fallen in love with editing because editing is really where your story comes to life. During the editing process, you're going to examine every single aspect of your story, your plot, your characters, your settings, your word choice, your sentence structure, and more. For most of us as writers, we dread or fear the editing process a bit because we're not quite sure what to expect. But actually, editing is where that story that you've been thinking of and dreaming of and working so hard on can really, really come to life. So with a bit of structure and a bit of direction, editing can actually become something that you love rather than a chore or something you fear. I think Gina in the chat was saying that they love editing more than writing, and that sounds like Gina has a clear idea of what to go in with editing, and also the idea that kind of editing is this magical time when you can really hone in on the vision and make it come to life. So if you were writing and you were to follow a very, very linear process, this is what it might look like. You would finish your first draft, and then you would jump into big picture, story, or developmental edits. At that point, you might decide to bring in a beta reader or a critique partner to give you some feedback. Then you would move into closer line edits, looking at your use of language and your sentence structure. Then you might bring in a professional editor to kind of tidy everything up. And then you would have a final draft that you decided to self-publish or query or whatever you would want to choose with that. That is what a linear process looks like. But for most of us, it looks much more like this, with a bunch more lines and chaos going everywhere. For most of us, we are going from stage to stage over and over again. We might be going from first draft into line editing because we like line editing more, and then deciding to go back to story editing. Or you might decide, actually, I'm really terrible at editing my own work, so I'm going to bring a beta reader in first, and then I will make story edits after that. Or you might go from first draft to story edit and first draft to story edit and back and forth. You might decide to just skip in and have a professional editor, then go back yourself. You might go between many of these stages multiple times. That is all okay. What I want you to take away from this is that what makes a good editing process is up to you. And it also often is different project to project. For many of us, some projects might work really smoothly and you might be able to go through them very easily and finish your edits very quickly. But for others, they might just languish and you might go through many, many rounds of different edits. That is all okay. Again, what makes a good editing process is up to you and up to what you like to work on and what your circumstances are. So some writers prefer to work by themselves the entire time they're editing. Some writers prefer to work with other people, whether that's a beta reader, a professional editor, or something else the entire time. Some people like to use technology to support their editing process. Some people do not. Some people will go through one round of revisions. Others will go through dozens and dozens and dozens over years and years and years. That is all okay. Every single one of us on this call is going to have a different editing process depending on the project that we're working on, what our strengths are, and what we're trying to get out of the process. What I want to put forward on this webinar today is a structured editing process so that you can feel if you have done these two things, you have a good chance of getting to a place where you've done your final draft. Now, the two stages that I recommend every single person go through on their drafts are story editing and line editing. I recommend going through those in two separate stages for a reason I'll get into in just a second. The first types of editing, story or developmental editing, is where you take a look at big picture aspects of your story, your plot, your characters, your setting. You're asking yourself questions like, does this character have a fulfilling character arc? Does this secondary character even need to be here? Does this plot have the key beats I need for a crime novel? Has my fantasy world been well developed? Or do I need to add in more scenes to bring immersion more for my reader? Has my magic system been explained well enough? You look at those big picture questions first, because often there are many substantive edits that could happen at that stage. So you might decide to cut out an entire character, or an entire chapter, or an entire subplot. You want to make sure your draft is as final as possible in terms of the ideas before you then go into the line editing stage. So at that story editing stage, you're really going to try to focus yourself in on those bigger picture questions so that you have almost the shape there. And then you go in with the kind of surgical precision during the line editing stage. Now, if we think about story editing as this big picture, macro level edits at big picture questions, line editing is where we zoom in almost page by page, paragraph by paragraph, sentence by sentence, and even word by word to look at how we use language to tell our story. And again, we do this second because during story editing, we need to make sure that we are not wasting our time editing language that we're just going to cut. So whenever possible, you want to try to do those bigger picture edits first and then line edits second. I also, again, recommend doing these in separate stages, not only because you might cut something that you're then going to spend a lot of time on doing, these kind of surgical line edits. But it also is quite a different headspace for many of us. Again, the questions you're asking yourself at each stage of the process are very, very different. And the level of kind of detail that you're looking at is often very, very different in each stage. Again, during line editing, you might spend 30 minutes thinking about a specific word choice, whereas story editing, you might spend 30 minutes reading a chapter and asking yourself, does the pace of this chapter reflect the beats that it should at this point in my novel. So you want to think about these almost in distinct phases because you can kind of put on your story editing hat to think big picture and then put on your line editing hat and then go into that there. When you're line editing is what the other reason why you might want to separate this is because us as editors and writers might have skill sets in one but not the other. So some of us might be very, very good at story editing but might struggle with line editing or vice versa. Again, what makes a good editing process is up to you, and understanding what kinds of questions you're asking at each part of the process can also help you think about what support do I need to make these edits as effectively as possible. And Anne says in the chat, story edit first because you don't want to spend time polishing firewood. That's exactly it. You don't want to spend time polishing firewood. You're just going to burn it. So exactly. Thank you, Anne, for that metaphor. Okay, as I mentioned, one of the reasons why it's so important to familiarize yourself with the different stages of editing is because then you can think about resources that you can have to help you. Now, those resources might range from beta readers, critique partners, professional editors, to technology. And I think one of the most exciting things about living as writers at this day and age is that there are many different ways that technology can help with editing. So technology can help, first of all, saving time and money. Editing is extremely challenging and it can be very, very hard and expensive to find resources. For many of us, we will not have gone to a professional editing school or gotten in any type of degree in editing. And even if we did, it's not necessarily that we've gotten a degree in fiction writing or narrative nonfiction or anything like that. So editing is very much a skill, and it's also very much a different skill than writing. So you're often having to build up and learn and be able to evaluate your own manuscript in a way that's very, very difficult. It's also incredibly time consuming, as many of us have said in the chat. We're often going back and forth from for many, many phases on the same manuscript. And then even if you are able to, or if you want to, bring in outside help, it can be really expensive to find resources like a professional editor. So technology is really helpful in kind of closing some of those gaps. So some of the ways that it can help are first by providing instant feedback. So professional editors, beta readers, critique partners are all amazing, but often they have waiting time. They're real people with lives that they have to go out and do. They might have client lists that they're working for. They might have full-time jobs that they're managing with their beta reading. And often it can be difficult to kind of lose your momentum and excitement about a project while you're waiting to receive that feedback. So technology can help by providing that instant feedback. It's also really effective at using for polishing before you use the human editor themselves. So say you found a great professional editor, you're excited to work with them, you are confident in their skills. You want to make sure you are getting the best bang for your buck, so to speak, when using that human editor. Technology can help by cleaning up your manuscript before that editor comes in, so they're spending their time on the highest leverage things that an editor can do, while you've gone in and cleaned up all your misspelled words or your overly wordy sentences, things that, again, you can focus on before you decide to employ a professional editor. Here at ProWritingAid, we very, very much believe that technology cannot and will not replace human editors or human writers. So I like to think about it as technology being something that you can use so that you can better utilize the skills of that professional editor. There are certain things that technology will never be able to tell you. They won't be able to tell you, if they've fallen in love with the protagonist of your romantasy, for instance, or whether they felt heartbreak at one of the horrible things that's happened. So that is what the professional editor can do and can start to think about and can help you with. Technology can help you even that manuscript out so that by the time you get them, you're using that professional editor for the things they're really best at that the technology can not support with. Technology can also help sharing difficult to find information that a human just could not find. So one of the features that I'll show you a little bit later when we get into line editing with ProWritingAid is the repeats report. It's super simple. It doesn't use AI at all. It basically just evaluates your manuscript and finds every single repeated phrase in your document. And that it does it in like 10 seconds, and then you just have a huge list of all of the repeated words and phrases in your document. That would be almost impossible for a human to do. It would take so much time, but you'd be surprised how many times during drafting you just get a phrase stuck in your head and then it's in your document and you need to change that because your reader's going to be like, didn't they just say, he had clear turquoise eyes 5 times in 5 different chapters? Again, when you have technology, you can find information like that at a touch of a button and make those types of changes that, again, improve your manuscript while also saving the time and efforts of your professional editor. Now, I also want you to think about using technology while editing as a spectrum. And every single one of us on this call is going to fall somewhere along this spectrum, depending on what we're comfortable with and what we're trying to use technology for. So this is a webinar for Scrivener. So I assume most of us will fall under somewhere on this because we're clearly at least using Scrivener to write our work. But in theory, you could just use a typewriter, which I guess is technology technically too. But you could write by hand and then edit by hand and never use technology at all, and that's perfectly valid. Or you could use technology for every single part of the process, from idea generation to even replacing large swaths of text. There is technology out there that is available for all of those phases, depending on what you're comfortable with. What I will suggest as you are evaluating technology is, first, be very, very clear about the jobs you want the technology to do. When you understand the jobs that you want technology to do, then you can find the right tools for that. There are thousands, millions probably, of writing tools out there now, and there are more being crafted every single day. So get clear on the jobs that you want the technology to do so you can find the right technology for yourself. So again, if you're looking for editing technology, look for something that specializes in editing. If you're looking for technology that specializes in editing and you're a creative writer, look for technology that specializes in editing for creative writers. The more specific you can get, the better. Now, you also need to be careful now with what you're trying to do with your document and how the technology you're using might impact that. What do I mean? So now there are, as many of us know, new generative AI features out there, and depending on where you're trying to publish, they might have different regulations or rules for how you're utilizing generative AI in your process. Using generative AI is also a spectrum in itself, from something that just analyzes your work to something that can replace your entire work as well. So what you want to think about is what are the rules at the specific place or the specific organization where I'm trying to publish, and how can I make sure that I'm not running afoul of those rules accidentally. So get very clear on where you're trying to publish, what you're trying to do, so that you can make sure that the features that you're using conform to those rules. Unfortunately, there's no set rule for everything everywhere. Every single organization has its own rules and its own regulations around the use of generative AI. So get extremely clear about what the rules are for where you're trying to publish, as well as how the technology that you're working with uses generative AI, if it does at all. So that way, again, you can understand where you fall on that spectrum. And then finally, I think somebody in the chat asked this: if you are using a feature with generative AI or really any technology at all, be very careful about looking at the privacy regulations and how an organization uses your text. Many tools out there now are using text to train their algorithms. That might be something that you are comfortable with, but if it is not, it is something you should look at and make sure that you are comfortable with the company's privacy policy and how it handles your documents before you decide to use that tool. So at ProWritingAid, we never access your text. We don't use it to train any of our algorithms, any of our AI, or anything like that at all. But that is not true for every single writing tool. So please be sure that you are checking with, what the policy is of the technology that you're using, so that way you're comfortable with that tech. And that is not just for any editing tools, that just goes across technology everywhere now, as more and more tech tools are incorporating AI. So again, think about the use of technology as a spectrum. Every single one of us will fall somewhere along the spectrum, and where you fall is valid. Understand the jobs that you want to do so you can pick the right technology for you. You can kind of go down an entire rabbit hole looking at writing tools, but again, focus on the ones that you need. Think about the right rules and regulations for where you're trying to publish to make sure the tools that you want to use fall within that. And then finally, make sure you're comfortable with the privacy policy and how your documents are being handled with the organization that you're working with. With all of that covered, let's talk about how to use ProWritingAid specifically to talk about those two phases of editing. So as I mentioned, story editing is that first phase of editing that I recommend you go through. It's often also called developmental editing. During the story edit, you are examining your story at a macro level. So you're specifically looking at your manuscript and the story you're telling, and you're really wanting to take a substantive look at the structure and development of your story. So that means looking at things like plot. Your plot is central to the story you're telling. So at this stage, you're going to be asking yourself questions like, is my plot well paced? Is it well paced for my genre? For instance, in crime novels, often the inciting incident, a crime, happens very early, maybe even on the first page or within the first couple of pages, whereas in other types of genres, it happens later. So you want to ask yourself, does my plot match the genre of story I'm telling? Is it well paced for what I'm trying to do? You also want to ask yourself, does it have enough conflict? Is there enough tension and conflict to propel this story forward? Is there tension and conflict that's not just external, but internal within my characters? Are there any holes or inconsistencies? Are there plot holes I've opened, but I haven't closed later? You'll also want to look at things like setting. So your characters are going to grow out of the world you create, and the worlds you create will also be dictated by the genre you're writing in. If you're writing in fantasy, sci-fi, historical fiction, you're typically going to want to have a very robust setting that feels really alive and vivid for your readers. Other genres, it might not matter as much, but you want to think about what is my genre and does my setting reflect the story I'm trying to tell? Not only that, but across all genres, does the setting you've created have an engaging sense of not just location, but of time, date, objects, senses? Have you really created a very immersive world? You'll also be looking at your characters at this state. Your characters are who your audience is relating to. As I mentioned previously, you'll be looking at your main characters, asking yourself, do they have clear goals, recognizable point of views, transformative character arc that my readers can really sink their teeth into? Are any of the secondary characters unnecessary, or do I perhaps need more secondary characters to round out my cast? So you'll be asking yourself those types of questions. Now, technology can support with story editing, and this is one of the ways that technology has made great improvements over the last few years. It can do everything from kind of give you more information on how to improve your setting to tell you whether or not your characters are engaging. And let me show a couple features of ProWritingAid here. I'm going to show this in ProWritingAid's web editor. I'll show you how to use it all in Scrivener towards the end. My computer is just a bit slow, and so if I switch between too many windows, it gets a bit slow while I'm also streaming. So I'm going to just keep into Chrome so I don't lock myself out, but I'll show you everything I'm showing you now is also available in Scrivener, which again, I'll show you how to get to at the end. Okay, so for story editing, we have a number of features. Most of our story editing features are here under the critique menu. So we have two features, chapter critique, which offers story level edits at a chapter level, so up to 4,000 words at one time, and manuscript analysis, which offers feedback on your full story. We also have a tool called Virtual Beta Reader, which you see in mine because I'm a ProWritingAid team member. It's coming out in just a few weeks, so we're going to have a third story editing feature here. But the basic way that this works is you select your text that you're running on, it runs a report and then spits back developmental feedback for you. I'm actually going to turn it over to Oliver in just a second because Oliver's used manuscript analysis really recently on one of his docs, and I'll let him talk about his experience with it. But I'm basically just going to quickly pull up some of the reports I've run on this previously so you can see what they look like. This is chapter critique, which looks at, again, up to 4,000 words at one time. It gives you a high-level overview of the strengths of the document, what the plot is, the characters, tension, point of view, and then at the end make suggested improvements for ways that you can tighten up that specific chapter. Manuscript analysis, on the other hand, is a much more in-depth look at a full story. It works on a full length of manuscript. It does everything from give you overviews of your whole story, so the kind of genre, the plot outline. It looks at the competitive landscape. It then goes deep into things like narrative theme and sorts areas between major, minor concerns and things that are working well. So you can kind of see, all right, here within plot and structure, here's a major concern that this is really predictable. Here's where the concern happens in my text, and here are a few suggested improvements. Now, before I turn this over to Oliver to talk about his experience with this, I want to just highlight here that this is a use of technology that does not edit your text at all for you. It just gives you information that you can access instantly, and then you have to choose what you implement or not. So it doesn't touch your text, it doesn't edit your text, it doesn't suggest any different sentences or anything like that for you. It just gives you information that you can choose to use or not. Oliver, do you want to talk a bit about how you use manuscript analysis?
Sure. Yeah. Let me share my screen real quick. We'll take a
Yeah.
look at that right now. So first off, I'm gonna just preface this to saying that I was initially kind of skeptical when I heard about this feature. I was like, "Oh, this sounds intriguing," but I've had a lot of companies and things in the past like kind of give you an idea like this is really cool, and then it turns out to be kind of not great. And so I came in this kind of apprehensive, like I don't know how this is gonna be. Even I have a co-writer who works on this with me. And we were like, I don't know, we'll just take it how it comes and see what happens. But I was optimistic but cautious. Okay. So I went ahead. Let me go ahead and open up my Scrivener project here. You can see this is it right here. And those of you who have been with me for a long time are very familiar with this manuscript. I've been working on it for a couple of years now. I've been posting it on Substack regularly. And so we're in the 5th draft of this thing. And so I was interested to see what has what's happened with it, what's going on, what problems there might be still after 5 drafts of this book. And so I went ahead and ran the manuscript analysis. Let me show you how that worked. Okay. I have to switch over to Scrivening's view here. Okay. And what that does, that's in view Scrivening's, allows me to see my entire manuscript as a single draft. Okay. And you can see here, one thing I need to do is also show titles here. Let me show you real quick. Show titles with Scrivenings. Okay. So we can see how the manuscript is all broken up here. We have my title, prologue, all the other titles in that have come through in my draft, and I can go all the way from the beginning to end, all 87,000 words. Okay. So to do this, okay, you can see I have ProWritingAid everywhere just right here in the corner here, kind of hiding away. Anytime I need that, it'll pop up over in here. I can click get a story level analysis, right? And there it is right there. There's the manuscript analysis feature right there. I click that, follow the prompts and go through it. Now, I don't have any more credits. I used my 1 credit yesterday, but let's go ahead and look at the feedback history. This is where we find the last analysis I received. You can see I did that 2 days ago. We pull that up, pops this up here. And as I was reading through this, I was just really impressed with how spot on a lot of it wasn't. It gives me an idea of like what my genre is. Fantasy, it's sword and sorcery, dark fantasy. I kind of always described it as kind of a comedic, humorous fantasy kind of thing, but I mean, it actually makes more sense as a dark fantasy. As I read through this, I'm like, okay, it kind of gave me a better idea, even helped me understand, hey, what my story is and where I'm at. We got here about my story. So this is broken up into several different sections. I'll show you here. We have here about my story itself, the plot and structure, characters and settings. And that's typically when I'm doing a developmental edit, that's what I'm looking at, these kind of higher level features like Haley was saying. We're looking at plot and structure. We're looking at characters. We're looking at world building and setting. And so to have it break it down into these 3 categories was like huge because now I could look at these individually, see what's working well and what's not working. But real quick, let's look at the about my story. It gives me an overview of the story, the kind of the key points of the plot. I was kind of interested to see that and how that lined up with my actual outline, how I kind of viewed that. What the setting is, themes and motifs. You can see we talk a lot about betrayal and trust, duty versus desire, the burden of leadership, which is spot on, exactly what we do. What I really liked, though, and this kind of surprised me, was this competitive landscape. And so to kind of give me an idea of how my book might perform or which readers would be interested in reading it. And this is a struggle for most writers. If you're getting ready to publish a book, like I am, you're wondering, who am I even writing for? Who is my audience? And even though I kind of have an idea, like, this is the kind of book I would have read from like, even from junior high upward. I read a lot of, grittier fantasy novels when I was growing up. And so to see that it's for age 16 and up seems about right. It's for young adult and adult fantasy readers. And it kind of made me excited to say, hey, I guess I kind of hit that mark. I'm kind of hitting that thing. And even cooler was it gave me some similar books to compare this with. So a lot of times, I don't know if you've been asked this as a writer, I'm sure you have, like, what other books are like your book? If I like your book, give me some examples of books that are similar. And honestly, I was like, I don't know what to tell you, but this gave me 3 good, solid book ideas, or rather similar books I could share with someone, like, Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, Mistborn, The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, both books I've read and which I find really interesting. The 3rd book, I have no idea, haven't read that book, The Poppy War by R.F. Is it Quang? I don't know.
Kwong,
But
yeah.
anyway, Kwang, sorry. Thank you so much, Haley. Appreciate Kwang. I haven't read that book, but it even made me think maybe I should read that book and see what's going on there and see how that relates. Anyway, I just thought that was really cool. And then it goes further. It breaks down by character, all these kind of main characters. We got our roles here, protagonist, secondary, confidant, secondary, antagonist, all these different things going on here. Tells you what type of character you're at, whether they're dynamic, round, static, even, whether they're a hero, everyman, magician, and even their presence, how often they appear in the story. And what this does is kind of makes me ask questions. Okay, Ned Burke, he is the main hero of the story, right? So it makes sense that he has about 70%. And the secondary was definitely Revelo, and 3rd was Nira, and the 4th was Ivel. And to see those kind of stats kind of line up, that's good. That's good. And so for me, I like to see numbers. And so this excites me that I can kind of break this down, see how much each character, how much screen time they're getting, if they're getting enough. And so where I'm worried about the most is like some of these lower level characters that are still important. They don't need to be up here in the 70, 60 range, but they do need to be a bit more than that. Specifically like this Adeline character who plays a love interest with our our secondary hero here. So I'm asking myself, okay, do I need to have more of her, and why, and or how, and things like that. It kind of makes me want to dig deeper here. Um, Even gives you an idea of what similar characters, how your character relates to different characters. I thought this was interesting that Ned, my hero, is similar to Frodo Baggins. I'm not sure I would go that far because he's kind of a, what do you call it? He's a warrior fighter. I would imagine he'd be more similar to Aragon or something like that. But it was kind of interesting to see that they gave me this comparison. Revelo with Randall Thor from The Wheel of Time, and Nira similar to Hermione Granger. I think it definitely nailed Revelo and Nira, but I'm not sure that Ned's was quite that's not the comparison I would have made. Then we even get a table of contents that breaks it up from the prologue all the way down to the epilogue with a narrative purpose. Typically use the Save the Cat structure or something similar to that, and so seeing it in the 3-act structure is fine. So you can kind of see how that's kind of broken up. We got our climax, and also I can compare that with my own beat sheet and say, okay, this is where it's lining up with the manuscript analysis. Does that line up with what I want it to be? Is that kind of, am I hitting those climaxes? Am I hitting those inciting incidents and catalysts when I want to? That kind of thing. Plus, oh, and this was just icing on the cake. Here we have our point of views, where it actually tells out who's the point of view character for each of these things, which is neat and nifty. Okay, there's so much more here. I don't want to go too long with this, but going back to the plot and structure, we can see things that are working well. We can see things that have some major concerns, and some of them I was aware of. Like I already knew I had too many subplots, and we were trying to cut down on this draft. In fact, we cut about 40,000 words from this entire draft from the previous draft. And still, it looks like there's too much going on still. So we're going to have to look at that and kind of figure out. But that's what I like about this analysis, is that we get to make those decisions here. Like Haley said, this is not something that I have to do, but it just analyzes the text and says, hey, these are some potential concerns. Some of them are major concerns. Some of them are just concerns, and some of them are minor concerns. And I can go through and then make those decisions as the writer or editor, as the case may be in this situation. And I can also take these things and I could share them with beta readers. I have beta readers. I have colleagues and stuff that I work with, and I can share them and say, hey, do you agree with this analysis? What do you think? As you read through this draft of the book, are these things that I need to be concerned about or not? And so I don't just take this as the end all be all. This is just a good starting point to kind of help me see that there are problems here and there are things that are working well. Let's capitalize on the things that are working well. Let's resolve some of the bigger concerns and kind of just pick and choose what's going to work best. And so anyway, Haley, thank you so much for letting me share that with you. It's pretty impressive what we got here. Lots of great stuff.
Yes, thank you. And I was just answering in the chat, a couple of people were asking questions about our usage of AI and specifically also how our feature is a bit different than autocrits. So I just wanted to say so autocrit runs their analysis on condensed chapter summaries, whereas we run on the text itself. So condensed chapter summaries might result in a less thorough evaluation. And then the answer to AI is that we do not access your text at all or retain it, as I mentioned previously. And let me just show you how to access it in Scrivener briefly while I am resharing so I don't have to go back and forth. So I have got ProWritingAid everywhere. So ProWritingAid everywhere for desktop, for Windows, or for Mac is what you'll want to use to access this in Scrivener. When you have it accessed, it pops up here on the right-hand side. Then you just navigate down to this chapter critique icon. Again, that's this third one, I guess, technically down here with the little thumbs up. And then you'll see all of the story editing features here. You can also, again, click here to access your feedback history. So all of the reports that you've ever run are accessible there. All right, let me just let me scare that one more time because it looks like somebody didn't see what it was looking like. Can you see, Oliver, can you see the little icon here on the right-hand side? Or does it not pop up?
You know what? I don't see it popping up. I think you just shared
Oh,
Scrivener
no.
itself, right? You might have to share your whole screen,
Yeah, I might have to
unfortunately.
share my whole screen. Hold on, let me try to minimize
I
some of
wish
the
it
many,
would
many
let us
windows
share
I have
two apps
open.
at once or something like that,
Yeah.
but it
Sorry
doesn't.
about that. Hold on. Oh, and yes, this manuscript has a lot of intentional errors, let's say, because it's a sample text.
Yeah.
Okay, so you should be able to see it now. Do you now see this little pop-up over here on the right?
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. Okay, so this is the ProWritingAid icon. You can move it around wherever you'd like. This is included with your subscription once you sign in the icon. And then you can just navigate down here to this icon with the little thumbs up. And that is where all of the story editing features live. You can pull up critique, manuscript analysis, again, virtual beta reader, reader impression. Because I'm a team member, I see it, but that will be in your feedback very shortly. And then you can also access your feedback history so you can see any of your previous reports. I do just want to highlight a couple quick things first. The manuscript analysis is not meant to be something that you use frequently. There's a lot of detailed feedback in there, as Oliver was saying. It is meant to be something that you have to use, that you do, and then you go in and you do some significant developmental edits on that. So it's, I cannot imagine that anyone would use it and then actually be able to implement all of those edits in a single day or even a week. There's a lot of things to think about. For that reason, it is, and for the reason that it is a much more comprehensive analysis and requires a lot of resource for us to run, you purchase it via credits. Critique, which is the single chapter, is included in our paid plans. So if you want to just run on a single chapter, that's included in the paid plans. But if you want to do the full manuscript analysis, it's an add-on fee. The critique usage is 1 usage per day. And so you can, continue to use critique on up to 4,000 words at a time. No, it's not 1 per year. It's 1 chapter per day. So you can rerun that every single day. And then manuscript analysis is a specific like single use. And then again, the intention is that the report is a lot of information that you can digest over a long period of time. And then thank you to Robert, who's sharing ProWritingAid Everywhere is basically the version of ProWritingAid that you can install in Google Docs, in Scrivener, wherever you're writing, and you can utilize it there. Okay, let me talk about line editing, and then we can jump into more questions. So we finished our first stage of writing, our first stage of editing as our story editing stage. Then we need to jump into line editing. Like I mentioned, story editing is the macro level look at your story. Line editing is where you really zoom into each individual page and each individual line and even each individual word to judge how effectively you've told your story. And your overall goal here is clarity. You're basically looking at your use of language to tell a clear and engaging story. I like to think about this as in the story editing, you're shaping the movie. And then in line editing, you're really making sure that every single sentence is a mini movie that is very clear for your readers. So in line editing, you might say, oh, I described this character as beautiful, but beautiful is actually very vague and can mean many things to many different people. So I actually need to describe her, golden spun hair or her crystal blue eyes or something like that. So at line editing, you're really zeroing in on your use of language, almost again, word by word, to make sure the movie you're telling or the story you're telling is like this accurate movie that your readers can then play in their heads. So you're looking at kind of 2 different things here. First is clarity. So you want to make sure that the language you're using is simple and clear. So questions you might ask yourself are, are subjects and verbs the stars of my sentence? Or have I overutilized passive voice? Am I using specific words for what I am trying to say? Again, have I chosen the word beautiful when, actually I need to do something more specific? Have I described somebody as fast, but actually they're so fast I should use a much stronger word to describe it? You'll also want to make sure your writing is readable for your specific audience at this time. A lot of us tend to write drafts that are a bit too difficult for our audience to read, whereas in a lot of mass market fiction, the language used is actually very simple and clear. So you might want to tone back some of your sentence constructions, remove some words from sentences, or even use simpler language, again, to make sure that movie is as clear and effective as possible. You'll also be looking at the engagement of your sentences here. So asking yourself questions like, have I kept up the pacing? And not just pacing on a scene by scene level, but do I have too many long sentences in a row? Or do I have too many short sentences in a row? Am I trying to write this really descriptive passage, but every single sentence is 5 to 7 words, and so it feels very, very choppy? Or conversely, am I describing a battle scene that should have so much tension, and yet every sentence is 30 words long, and so it feels very exhausting for my reader? You'll also look at this point at things like echoes and repeats. Do you have phrases that are stuck in your head that you have just continued to repeat yourself? Or have you started every single sentence with the same words or types of words? So you want to think about that when you're looking at line editing. Again, technology is very, very useful for line editing. And depending on your comfort level with AI, you can use tons of different technology that doesn't use generative AI at all and still get a lot of value from line editing. So let's look at a little bit of what I mean by that. So I'm back in the web editor. Again, all of these reports are available in Scrivener, but I'm just showing you this so I don't have to switch windows. When I am line editing, I tend to come into ProWritingAid first and then select my document type. So this is a crime novel. So I'm going to write it as a actually it's more of a mystery. So I'm going to select it as a mystery. There's also thriller in here. And when you set your genre or document type, it gives you custom scores for key line editing areas and then shows you how you match up to the benchmark for that specific type of work. So we can see here that I'm a little outside of my target benchmark for grammar, but I'm within this target benchmark for style and sentence length. So this kind of gives me a good roadmap for what I should focus my line editing energy on first. I kind of come in here, look at all my areas where I'm out of the target range, and then focus on that first. Now within line editing, let's say we come in here to the glue index, which is our sticky sentences report. Again, there are many ways that you can utilize the tool. So glue index specifically looks at sentences that are overly wordy, that have too many filler words, conjunctions, articles, words that again are necessary to make the sentence make sense, but if you overuse them, the sentence becomes sticky. It's just not a pleasant experience for your reader. So the first thing at kind of the baseline level, this report just identifies those sentences in your document and highlights what they are as well as what those glue words are. If you are not super comfortable using generative AI, you could just stop there, find the sentences, find the words, and then rewrite it yourself. If you're more comfortable with generative AI, you can suggest rephrases for the document. Those rephrases might be something that you decide to insert directly in your document, or they could just provide you with inspiration for how to rewrite. So again, with line editing, you get a lot of nuance to kind of how you utilize features, whether it's just giving you that information or instead giving you information that you can then kind of look at to rephrase specific sentences, words, etc. Again, at ProWritingAid, we do not believe that technology can or even really should replace writers or editors. So you will not find any features within ProWritingAid that generate huge amounts of text. You cannot regenerate an entire page. You cannot regenerate anything larger. It works at kind of the specific sentence level. So if you were wanting to use a feature like that, again, just keep in mind that it's used at the sentence level because our intention is for you to think about it and make sure that you retain your kind of creative voice over something like that. Okay, so again, there are a number of different line editing features that you can like. The repeats report, which I've talked about previously, we've got 2 repeats phrases that again are so useful and just giving you that information that would be really difficult to find by yourself or even with an editor. It just highlights all of the repeated words or phrases. You can come in and you can see what they are. So for instance, in this document, I said into her bag and made her way back twice. That was not intentional, so I should really go in and fix one of those. Again, similarly to the other report, you can highlight this and then either rephrase it with ProWritingAid or just rephrase it yourself. But it's this kind of information that can really help you clean up your manuscript, whether before you're submitting it or before you're bringing in a professional editor to make it more effective. Echoes does something similar, but actually looks at close repeats. So not just all of the repeats everywhere, but where you've done that within close proximity. And you can actually come into your settings and set what you want that close proximity to be. So set it further apart or longer apart or further apart just to see kind of what you would like for it to be. Other, again, very useful reports, for instance, sentence length. I just come in this one and use this as almost a pacing check. So I'll come in to see, okay, I've got a lot of longer sentences here, and then a spate of shorter ones. And then you can just kind of see this visualization of, does this match my intention here? Is this quickly paced in terms of sentence length because there's a lot of action happening? Or should I'm describing something, so I actually need it to be a lot longer and it can go in and make those changes. So again, it's all of this information that you might not otherwise have about your document that you can then use to make it better. And this is what I really like to think about when I think about how technology can help you. It's just this information that would be really difficult to get anywhere else. Another great example of this is the sensory check. The sensory check just comes in and highlights all of your utilizations of sensory words. As writers, we tend to lean heavily into sight words, but creating a vivid description that comes alive for your characters, you need to use all 5 senses. So this gives you all 5 senses. We don't have taste here, so again, that could be something like maybe I want to add taste words in. Maybe I want to look at this distribution and make sure it's a bit more effective for the scene. But again, it's just this information that you can then use to make better decisions about what you're writing. Okay, so I want you to remember before we get into questions that editing is really where your book comes alive. The more you edit and the way you think about your text in editing is really how can I make this story as strong as it can possibly be? And if you think about editing in 2 distinct phases, that kind of story editing, developmental editing, big picture checks, and line editing, that's zooming into the language, it gives you a much clearer roadmap for what I should do and how I can then move forward from there. I also want you to think about how technology can help you. Again, think about what are the jobs that I need technology to do? What's my comfort level and what's acceptable with where I'm trying to publish this or what I'm trying to do with this text? And then also always be careful with how the technology that you're using handles your text and make sure you're happy with the privacy policies that it establishes. Okay, I think that is everything for now, and we can jump into questions. Let's see.
Perfect. Are there any that are looking good there for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can just jump down them. And we can just go from there. So Anonymous asked, are you able to print the manuscript feedback? Yes. There's a little icon for printing at the top right-hand corner when you open the report. Let's see. Will there be a feature to highlight a specific word types, past participles, gerunds, etc.? So the sentence structure report, which I'll just show right here, highlights each of the sentences. And so you can kind of come in here and you can almost create this yourself by clicking these little eye icons to show which you want to see and which you don't. So if you don't want to see any of the ones with subjects, you can hide that. I think that's kind of what you were asking for there. Yes, the question is, isn't manuscript analysis a pay feature? What about chapter critique? Yes, as I mentioned, manuscript analysis is a pay feature. The intention is not that you should use it every day, but that you need to use it sparingly. It's a much more in-depth feature. We anticipate people might only need a couple per year. You purchase credits for manuscript analysis. Chapter critique is included in our paid plans. You get those reset every single day. So you get 1 chapter critique per day on Premium and then 3 chapter critiques per day on Premium Pro.
Can I suggest something with that too? I just looking at my own process on how I would use that. I would definitely do a manuscript critique probably once, maybe twice a year, depending on like, if where I'm going with that novel, right? Because like you said, it does take a long time to get through that. I'm at the feedback I had, I know it's going to take me a good couple months to get through at least. And the chapter critique once a day seems ideal. If you're, depending on what your output is, like I put out a chapter a week. And so even once a day probably is too much for me. I would probably just use that once a week and probably just before I shared it with someone. So I have a co-writer, I have beta readers. I would do that first, look at it, take that feedback, apply it, and then share it with somebody. So just give you an idea of how someone might use it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Oliver.
Yeah.
George asks, is ProWritingAid working towards having the entire novel reviewed? Yes, that's manuscript analysis. You can do the whole novel at once now. Is this software available in other languages? I think somebody had asked about Spanish. Right now, unfortunately, it's only available in English. Sorry about that. Does the competitive analysis landscape in manuscript analysis go by country? You can't currently, say, oh, I want to see the competitive analysis in Indonesia, for instance, but that would be a great feature. I will take that back to the team.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, it's super cool. Is there a book that details how to use ProWritingAid and Scrivener in tandem? Unfortunately, there isn't. One of the reasons there isn't is just because technology changes all the time. So actually writing a book is really difficult because as soon as you've published it, there's basically a new feature.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then it takes forever to change. But we have a YouTube channel where we go into things like that, as well as the community, and then events like this, that we're happy to
Yep.
do.
I agreed. Yep. I'll be creating and generating content on YouTube as well, blog posts. There's stuff coming. So just stay tuned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
uh, Anonymous asks, how is this app program and what inspired the approach? It's a good question. I don't know the specifics of the programming languages. I'm not an engineer. But ProWritingAid started because our founder, Chris Banks, he was a technical writer and wanted to write fiction writing. So he actually just built it for himself first 14 years ago. And basically since that, so it was kind of built, he was the first customer, but now we do a ton of customer research. Every feature you see, we go through multiple rounds of iterations, and are just really we like to think about serving, I guess our approach now is that we want to create tools that serve creative writers across the entire writer journey. And some of those tools might use AI, some of those tools might be for planning or plotting or timekeeping or anything like that. So we really just want to be as useful as possible to creative writers, and that's what inspires us now. Um, Chris says, can you use the reporting in ProWritingAid to only look at non-dialogue? Yes and no. In your settings, Chris, you can change it to avoid certain things in dialogue, so like adverbs or cliches, etc. Oh, Sherry asked, does it send you to where the suggested edit is? No, it just tells you where it is in the text, Sherry. It's not like a static link to that. A part of the reason is because like you might change that, and so then the report would be up, like the links in the reports would change. So it just tells you where it's located in your text. William asks, what if you're bending the rules as part of your voice? How can it help to determine if your voice is working or not? This is a really good question. First of all, I would want to say that just like the way any editing feedback is something that you can take on board or not, technology feedback is something you can take on board or choose to not take on board. It's totally up to you. And so every single suggestion from ProWritingAid is very much just a suggestion. You can choose to implement it or you can choose to not implement it. I would say if like the kind of is your voice working question goes into those bigger picture questions on like manuscript analysis, chapter critique, where you're trying to see, is my point getting across? Your voice might trigger line editing suggestions because you're talking colloquially or using intentional words that might not be in the dictionary, which is fine, but you want to think, is that the picture, the story I'm trying to tell getting across? And so it's almost more of kind of a developmental editing question. This also might actually be a perfect opportunity to bring in a human editor or a beta reader to say, hey, is this working for you or is it not? Oh, right, let's see. I just want to check the time. Cool, we've got time.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm confused about the different types of ProWritingAid and the price differences depending on whether you have Scrivener. So you can use any ProWritingAid package with Scrivener. So they're two separate purchases. All of ProWritingAid Everywhere is just basically the name of our app that installs into Scrivener, and you can use that on free. You can use that on premium. You can use that on premium, our highest level plans as well. So it really you just want to think about the features that you want, and then once you have the features, once you decide the features that you want, you can install again ProWritingAid Everywhere, and you just basically log into it, and then it just gives you the features that you have based on your plan. But premium and premium pro, you can all get those within Scrivener, if that makes sense. It's totally
Can I
separate.
clarify something real quick too about that?
Yeah.
Just so people understand that it is a separate app, and so you don't have to have Scrivener to use ProWritingAid Everywhere. And the idea that it's everywhere is that you can use it in any writing app. And so even me, even though I use Scrivener predominantly for writing my novels, I can use it in Word. I can use it. You have an online one for like Chrome, right? For Google Docs and things like that as well, don't you? An extension or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
just be aware that you can use it in lots of different places, so not just Scrivener. So if you have Scrivener, it kind of just pops up there when you're in there, and you can start using it and working with it. It's great.
Yep, perfect. Um, William says, what does the manuscript edit cost? It depends what plan you have. So there is a free plan where it's the most expensive. And then if you have premium or premium pro, you get an additional discount on the credits. And then you can purchase a single or a bundle of 3 or 10. The more you buy, obviously, the more you save as well. So just kind of figure out what you would like and then go from there. Michael asks, what critique style would be appropriate for noir? I would say probably thriller, but again, have a look there. We don't actually have noir as one of ours, but thriller, maybe mystery, kind of depending on the specifics of your story. Kevin asks, can you line edit first if you haven't done your story edit yet? I mean, Kevin, ultimately it's you have free will. You can do what you would like. That being said, as we've mentioned, we story edit first because the metaphor was like you don't want to polish firewood. You might end up cutting a bunch, so it's kind of like taking a lot of work on something that doing a lot of work on something you might cut. That being said, you could also take the mindset that like any practice line editing is good practice as well. So maybe it's just practice, even if you don't use text. I again typically
That's
recommend story edit first, but
yeah.
yeah. Oliver, do you have any
That's
thoughts?
very optimistic, Haley. Yeah, because let me just share a story with you. The first draft I wrote, it's very similar to you, of the first novel I ever wrote. I spent, not kidding, about 5 years on 5 chapters. Okay, maybe 10. It might have been 10 chapters, 5 to 10 chapters. And I wrote and rewrote and rewrote and rewrote for years, doing all this line editing, never considering the big picture. And I don't want to say I wasted my time, but honestly, when I look back, I'm like, it was kind of a waste of time. I got really good at line editing. I'm really good at line editing now. So I guess if we're optimistic, I can be happy about about that. But I wasted a lot of time that I should have been thinking big picture. And so when I finally did finish the book, I ended up just tabling the whole thing because once I looked back at the entire draft, I realized there were so many big picture problems that I hadn't addressed that whole beginning was going to change. And so I don't know why did I spend so much time rewriting 5 chapters that ended up needing to be something completely different? So having learned from that, I would definitely encourage you, unless you want to get really good at line editing, I'd encourage you to consider that story edit first. It saves you so much time. It just will save you so much time. Anyway,
Yeah,
go ahead.
agreed. Wendy C asks, what part of PWA constitutes AI use for most publishers? This is such a difficult question to answer because almost every single publisher has different rules. Like there just isn't a common. I'm not trying to get out of the question. There just isn't a common definition of what constitutes it. I think somebody else had asked, like, if you use ProWritingAid, will it generate as, or will it show up as AI usage? Again, it really depends. Like, I don't think any of the AI detectors are even very good. A lot of them, do false positives and things like that. Get clear on the specific publisher that you're looking for. If they are very against generative AI, then just don't use rephrase. Rephrase and Sparks are the only ones that would touch your text. Manuscript analysis runs off of generative AI, but it doesn't edit your text at all. So I don't know how anyone would use that. Again, it kind of depends where you're publishing and what they specifically say. Do they specifically say you can't use AI at any part of the process? Do they specifically say that you can't use AI to edit and to touch your text? Do they specifically say you can't use technology at all? I'm hopeful that there will be more clarity on this in the next couple of years as some of these court cases are decided and as hopefully there's just clarity on it, because it really is a bit confusing right now and it's really difficult because almost like even Google Docs, every program now has AI basically built into it. So it's really difficult to tell. I'm sorry, there's not a better answer for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, look at the publisher and see what they say.
Yeah, we're living in a lot of uncertainty with the AI
Yeah,
landscape right now. So, I personally, I would just, I agree with everything Haley says, but just get to work, just work and try to be mindful of it, but just get your writing done. Have some fun with it.
yeah. Okay, I think I'm just having a look at a lot of the questions. For everybody who's asking, yes, Scrivener, again, ProWritingAid Everywhere will work directly in Scrivener. You just need to download the desktop version of Scrivener, and then that will show up no matter what plan you have, even if you have free, it will work. Somebody asked about the changes, Calliope, apologies if I'm mispronouncing that, what's free and what's add-on. The best way to do it is just to go to prowritingaid.com/pricing. There's a lot of different things. I think the biggest thing with free is that you have a 500 word count limit as well as a limit on the number of reports, rephrase, and sparks you run per day. And then once you kind of go up to premium and premium pro, you get unlimited runs on the kind of core line editing reports, and then some additional features like chapter critique as well. Lee asks, I can see a lot of the reports on desktop, but not all. All of the reports are there. They just might be hidden under different menus. So there's no change in the reports from everywhere to the web editor. They just are kind of organized slightly differently. Okay, I think that is most of the questions that we can answer for today. Again, there's a couple more specific technical questions. Please feel free to email in to hello@ProWritingAid.com, and we would be more than happy to answer them there.
Perfect. Excellent. Yeah. Let me real quick. I'm just going to share some emails as well from our team. So if you have any questions Scrivener related, we can get you help there as well. There's several, so rather than mentioning them all, I'm just going to show a quick slide here real quick. Let's see. So you guys can see that. Boom. Okay. So right there, Scrivener/Max, Scrivener/Win, and the mobile. And if you're using Scapple as well, I also have my own personal email if you want to send me a question about the webinar, the replays, and things like that. And I also have ProWritingAid's website, help.prowritingaid.com. And you said what was the email again?
It's the wrong window. It's
the wrong window.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. Thank you. Can you see that now? Maybe? There we go.
Yes, there we go.
Perfect. Sorry about that. Yeah. So there's all those links there for you. Those emails. Feel free to reach out to us. We're here to help you. It doesn't cost you anything. So you can reach out to me, sending me an email directly. I love hearing from you guys, hearing your feedback about the presentations, what you're looking for going forward. If you have a technical question, you can see all those emails right there. Send those technical questions that way. We will get you taken care of. So looking good. Let's see if I missed anything here. I think we're good to go. So I just want to thank everyone for coming. Thank you so much, Haley. Really appreciate you and all you've done today. This has been a phenomenal presentation. I've even learned a lot. I'm always learning more. And so I'm excited I was able to see all these wonderful features. I can't wait to see the beta reader feature that's coming out. Did you give us a timeline for that?
Oh yeah, it's in final tests now. So like
I
would maybe even within the month. Very, very soon. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's really exciting. Thank you for sharing that little tidbit with us. So yeah, I'll definitely be testing that out and probably showing it to you guys in the future see how it goes. So thank you, Haley, so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, well, we'll see you all. I have one more session, guys. For those of you who are interested, on Friday, we're going to be talking about how to keep your novel on track in Scrivener as a pantser. So look forward to that. I'll be sending out links for the replay and everything. So stay tuned. And as always, keep writing and stay creative. We'll see you.